Two twin sisters ask a young billionaire to save their father, but when he enters the old house, he's shocked to recognize who is lying in the bed. The autumn morning in New York brought that typical hustle of a big metropolis. Daniel Martin adjusted his Italian silk tie as he descended the steps of the imposing building where he had just closed yet another multi-million-dollar deal. At 35, his name appeared among the most promising entrepreneurs in the United States, owner of a fortune built with intelligence and persistence. "Sir." "Please, sir." Daniel turned around when he heard a child's voice calling out. Two identical girls, no more than 5 years old, were running toward him. They wore coats far too simple for the cold weather and held each other's hands as they approached. They had the same dark hair tied in messy braids and almond-shaped eyes filled with urgency. "Sir, please help our daddy," one of them said, extending her small hand to tug on Daniel's coat sleeve. Daniel glanced around in surprise. Where were these children's parents? How were two such young girls alone in the middle of the city? "Where is your mom?" he asked, kneeling so he was on their level. "I shouldn't be out on the street by yourselves. Mommy's at home taking care of Daddy," replied the second girl, her large eyes fixed on Daniel. "He's really sick. The doctor said he needs a lot of money for the medicine." The first girl nodded in agreement. "We saw your big car. People with big cars have money. Can you help our daddy?" Daniel discreetly checked his watch. He had a video conference in 30 minutes. He should probably call social services and let them handle this. But there was something in these little girls' eyes that stopped him from simply sending them away. "What are your names?" he asked, softening his voice. "I'm Lucia," said the first girl. "She's Camilla. We're twins." "How did you get here? Is your home far?" "We ran away," Camilla confessed, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Mommy was crying this morning. She was talking on the phone about not having enough money for Daddy's new medicine." "Our house is that way," Lucia added, pointing vaguely in one direction. "We know how to get back." Daniel hesitated. His common sense told him not to get involved, but he couldn't ignore two small children wandering alone through the streets. Besides, their mother must be desperate, looking for them. "All right, I'll take you home, and then we can see how to help your dad." "How about that?" The twins exchanged glances, as if consulting each other in a silent language only they understood, then nodded in unison. "Raphael," he said into his phone after a few seconds, "cancel my appointments for the next 2 hours." Something unexpected came up. The luxury car looked out of place in that neighborhood of old buildings and narrow streets. The girls sat in the back seat, wide-eyed, clearly impressed by the vehicle's interior. "There's a TV in the car," Lucia exclaimed, pointing to the built-in screen. "And the seats are so soft," Camilla added, running her little hands over the leather. "It's on that street," Lucia indicated a few minutes later, pointing to a narrow alley that barely fit the car. Daniel instructed his driver to stop, and they continued on foot. The twins ran ahead, occasionally holding his hands to guide him to a 4-story building whose faded facade spoke of better times. "It's upstairs," said Camilla, pointing to the staircase. "The elevator's broken." Daniel followed the girls up 4 flights of stairs. They moved quickly, used to the climb, while he wondered what kind of treatment could be so expensive that it drove 2 little girls to approach strangers on the street. Before they could even knock, the apartment door swung open abruptly, revealing a young woman with a distressed expression that immediately turned to relief. "Thank God," she exclaimed, crouching down to hug the girls. "Where were you? I looked everywhere." Then she noticed Daniel standing in the hallway, and her face went pale. "Who are you? Why are you with my daughters?" "They came up to me on the street," Daniel explained quickly. "They said their father is sick and needs help with treatment. I thought it best to bring them back." The woman visibly relaxed, gratitude replacing the suspicion in her eyes. "Thank you for bringing them back safely. I'm Elena Vega." She turned to the girls with a stern look. "What were you thinking? You know how dangerous it is to go out on your own." "But Mommy, he has a big car," Lucia justified with the flawless logic of a child. "You said on the phone you needed money for Daddy's medicine." Elena blushed, clearly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, sir. They overheard a conversation they shouldn't have. I appreciate you bringing them back, but we don't want to bother you." "Daniel Martin," he introduced himself, extending his hand. "And it's no bother at all." The girls looked at their mother with pleading expressions. "Can he see Daddy? Please." Eleanor hesitated, eyeing Daniel with a mixture of gratitude and distrust. "My husband is resting. He hasn't been well and—" "We brought help, Mommy," insisted Camilla. "Look at his watch. It's gold." Daniel couldn't help a faint smile at the girl's perceptive comment. Elena looked even more mortified. "Really, Mr. Martin, we appreciate your kindness in bringing the girls back, but please," he said gently, "if I could just have a moment with your husband." The girls mentioned a costly medical treatment. "Maybe I can help somehow." Elena studied him for a moment, as if trying to gauge his intentions, then sighed. "All right. Please, come in." The apartment was small, but impeccably clean and organized. Photos of the twins decorated the walls, along with framed diplomas and what seemed to be souvenirs from modest trips. On the living room table, medications were meticulously arranged next to a folder of medical papers. "The girls will stay with me while you talk to my husband," said Elena, holding the twins by their shoulders. "He gets tired easily." "I understand," Daniel replied, following her to the bedroom door. Elena knocked softly before opening. "Augusto, we have a visitor." The girls, well, it's a long story. She gestured for Daniel to enter, then closed the door, leaving him alone with her husband. The room was small, dominated by a double bed where a man lay propped up on pillows. The curtains were partially drawn, casting a gentle twilight over the space. The man appeared thin, his skin sallow from illness. When his eyes met Daniel's, time seemed to stand still. It was like looking into a mirror warped by time and disease. The silence that followed was almost tangible. Daniel felt his legs weaken. He leaned against the nearest wall, unable to look away from the man. The same eyes, the same face shape, the same distinctive features he recognized every morning when he shaved. Who are you?" he finally managed to ask, his voice barely recognizable. The man in the bed seemed equally shocked, his wide eyes fixed on Daniel. "My name is Augusto Vega," he replied in a weak but resolute voice. "And you?" "Daniel Martin," he answered automatically, still stunned by the impossible resemblance. Augusto tried to sit up more in bed, a fit of coughing cutting his movement short. When he recovered, he continued to stare at Daniel in amazement. "How did my daughters find you?" "They approached me on the street, said their dad needed help paying for an expensive treatment." Augusto closed his eyes for a moment, shaking his head. "They're impulsive. I apologize for the inconvenience." "It's not an inconvenience," Daniel replied, taking a step closer to the bed, unable to suppress his curiosity. "But I think we need to address the obvious here." "The resemblance?" Augusto said, nodding slowly. "It's unsettling." "It's more than a passing resemblance," Daniel insisted. "How old are you?" 35. "Date of birth?" "March 15th. Daniel felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. He moved toward the chair by the bed and sat down, his legs finally giving out under the weight of the revelation. "I was also born on March 15th of 35 years ago." The two men stared at each other in silence, the same unspoken question hanging in the air between them. "Did you always know you had a brother?" Daniel finally asked. Augusto shook his head. "I always believed I was an only child. My mother never mentioned anything else. And you?" "The same. My parents never said a word." The door opened softly, and Elena entered with a tray holding 2 cups of coffee. The twins peeked curiously through the crack in the door before she shut it with her foot. "I thought you might want—" "Oh!" She stopped abruptly, noticing the tension in the room and how the two men stared at each other. "Is everything all right?" "Elena," Augusto said calmly, "look at us. What do you see?" She set the tray on the bedside table, studying the two men more intently. Her face revealed a gradual realization of their strange resemblance. "My God," she whispered, "you two are identical. How did I not see it before?" "We were born on the same day," Augusto informed her. "Daniel and I—" Elena covered her mouth with her hands, grasping the implications. "That means that you're twin brothers, apparently," Daniel concluded. though neither of us knew about the other until today. The door opened again, and the twins entered unceremoniously, unable to contain their curiosity any longer. "Mummy, why does the man with the big car look like Daddy?" Lucia asked, hopping up on the bed beside her father. "Is he your brother, Daddy?" added Camilla, studying both men's faces with the fearless curiosity of children. Augusto smiled at his daughters, gently stroking Lucia's hair. "It seems so, Princess, although neither he nor I knew until now." "So he's our uncle?" asked Camilla, turning to Daniel with wide eyes. The innocent question struck Daniel with unexpected force. "Uncle? He had nieces, a family he never knew existed." "I believe so," he replied, his voice filled with unfamiliar emotion. "Cool," Lucia exclaimed. "We never had an uncle before." Elena looked as though she was trying to process everything. "This is extraordinary, but how? Why?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I intend to find out." He turned to Augusto. "Regardless of the mystery behind all of this, your daughters mentioned you need treatment. What's going on?" Augusto exchanged a glance with Elena before answering. "Leukemia. Conventional treatments haven't worked. There's an experimental therapy, but..." He made a gesture with his hand, indicating their financial situation. "How much does it cost?" "More than we could ever hope to afford," Elena replied, worry evident in her voice. "We already sold the car, pawned my family jewelry. The bank denied our loan request because..." "I'll pay," Daniel interrupted firmly. "I'll cover all the treatment costs." Elena and Augusto stared at him in astonishment. "We can't accept that," Elena automatically protested. "There's too much money, and even if you are, well, you only just met." "Precisely for that reason," insisted Daniel. "I've spent my entire life not knowing I had a brother. Now that I've found you, Augusto, I won't lose you to a disease that can be treated." The words came naturally, though Daniel could hardly believe he was the one saying them. He had always been methodical in his decisions, never impulsive. But now, facing this man who was his mirror image, these girls who shared his blood, he felt a certainty that transcended logic. "Please," he continued, looking at Elena. "Let me help." Augusto reached out and took Daniel's hand. "Thank you," he said simply, his voice charged with emotion. The twins cheered, jumping on the bed, until Elena gently told them to calm down. "Easy, girls. Your dad needs to rest." "I'll make some calls," Daniel said, pulling out his phone. "I know the best doctors. We can start treatment immediately." As he made the arrangements, setting up consultations with specialists and securing immediate access to the experimental therapy, Daniel observed the family's interaction. Augusto clearly adored his daughters, and they adored him. Elena showed the calm strength of someone who faces adversity without giving in. They were a close-knit family, bravely fighting a difficult battle together. And now, inexplicably, he was part of that family too. When he finished making the calls, he announced, "Everything's arranged. Tomorrow morning, a medical team will come here for a full evaluation. Then we'll start the treatment at the clinic." "That soon?" asked Elena, surprised. Daniel smiled slightly. "Let's say I have a few contacts. Will Uncle fix Daddy?" asked Camilla, coming closer to Daniel with hopeful eyes. Daniel crouched to her level. "I'll do everything I can," he promised, surprised by the sincerity of his own words. As the afternoon wore on, Daniel stayed with the family, learning more about them. Augusto had been a literature professor at a local university before his illness forced him to take leave. Elena worked as a nurse, ironically in oncology, allowing her to care for her husband at home, though it meant they relied on only one income. The twins had started school the previous year and loved drawing and listening to stories their father invented for them. It was a modest life, but rich in affection, so different from the lonely, business-focused existence Daniel led. "What about your mother?" Daniel asked Augusto once the girls were finally persuaded to go play in their room. "She never mentioned anything about a twin brother." "My mother passed away 2 years ago," Augusto replied. "Cancer as well, ironically. But no, she never said anything." "And your parents?" "My father died when I was 20, but my mother, Isabel, is still alive. I'll talk to her tomorrow. If anyone has answers, it's her. You think they knew? Asked Eleanor, who was now sitting beside her husband on the bed. That they deliberately separated you two. I can't imagine another explanation, Daniel replied. The question is why? A heavy silence fell, loaded with unanswered questions. Finally, Augusto spoke. Regardless of the reasons, I'm grateful my daughters found you today, not just for the treatment, but for completing a part of my story I didn't even know was missing. Daniel nodded, unable to express the storm of emotions swirling within. In a matter of hours, his orderly, predictable life had been completely transformed. Now he was connected to this man, his wife, and their daughters by bonds he didn't fully understand but felt deeply. I'm going to find out the truth, he promised. For all of us. When he finally left, promising to return the next morning with the doctors, the twins insisted on walking him to the door. You're really coming back, Uncle Daniel? Lucia asked, her small hand gripping his finger. I'll be back tomorrow, he assured her, and we'll help your dad get better. Promise? Camilla persisted. I promise. On the drive to his mansion in New York's exclusive suburbs, Daniel couldn't stop thinking about that day's strange and extraordinary encounter. How could his life have been so different from Augusto's, who had decided to separate them? And why? Tomorrow he would confront his mother and demand the truth. But for now, his mind was occupied with plans to ensure Augusto received the best possible treatment. He couldn't fully explain, even to himself, the protective impulse he felt toward a man he'd just met and two little girls who had literally stepped into his life asking for help in the street. But he knew, with a certainty he rarely experienced, that he would do everything in his power not to lose the family he had just discovered. Daniel had barely slept the previous night. The image of Augusto, his face so much like his own, remained vivid in his mind. Those two girls, Lucia and Camilla, had shaken his orderly, predictable life in a matter of hours. After leaving the Vega family's apartment, he returned to his mansion with only one certainty: he needed to speak to his mother. Breakfast at the Martin residence followed the same ritual for decades. Isabel, now 65, sipped green tea in the glass-enclosed porch, observing the meticulously kept garden while flipping through the morning newspaper. She was so absorbed in her reading that she didn't notice her son's presence until he pulled the chair across from her. Daniel, what a surprise to find you home at this hour. I thought you'd be at the office early as usual. Isabel smiled, but her smile faltered when she noticed her son's grave expression. She knew him far too well not to see that something important was troubling him. Did something happen? She asked, setting the paper aside. Daniel studied his mother's elegant face. The years had treated Isabel Martin kindly. At 65, she still had the upright posture and watchful gaze that had always defined her. How could he begin a conversation that might shake everything they believed about their family? I need to ask you something, Mom, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Isabel raised an eyebrow, maintaining the composure he had always admired in her. Of course, son, what's going on? Daniel took a deep breath before continuing. Yesterday, I met a man named Augusto Vega. He watched his mother's face closely, searching for any sign of recognition. Isabel remained neutral, but her fingers tightened slightly around the cup of tea. And who is this man? Someone who could be my mirror image. A man exactly my age, with my face, my eyes, even the shape of my hands. A heavy silence fell over the porch. Isabel looked away for the first time, focusing instead on the garden outside. Mom, Daniel said more firmly. Who am I, really? Where did I come from? Isabel placed the cup on the table, her hands trembling slightly. For several minutes, she stayed silent, as though fighting an internal battle. When she finally spoke, her voice was laced with contained emotion. I've always feared this day, she said quietly. I hoped, naively perhaps, that it would never come. What day, Mom? What are you talking about? Isabel raised her eyes to meet his, and Daniel saw something he had rarely witnessed before: vulnerability. The day you found out the truth, that you weren't born a Martin. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. Although he had suspected ever since he saw Augusto, hearing the confirmation from his own mother was different. It was real. I'm adopted, he said, Not as a question, but as a statement. Isabel nodded slowly. Not exactly adopted in the legal sense of the word. You were found. Daniel leaned forward, every fiber of his being focused on his mother's words. Found where? How? Isabel sighed deeply before continuing. It was a night in March, 35 years ago. Your father and I had just returned from a reception. It was almost midnight when Carmela, our housekeeper at the time, came rushing to us, more agitated than I'd ever seen her. Isabel paused, lost in her memories, then went on. She said there was a baby at the door, a newborn, wrapped in expensive blankets, peacefully sleeping in a small basket. There was no note, no identification, just a perfect baby, as if delivered by angels. Daniel tried to process what he was hearing. It sounded like something straight out of a sentimental novel, not the story of his own life. And you just took me in, without looking for my biological parents. Isabel twisted her hands, a nervous gesture Daniel had never seen in her before. How your father wanted to call the authorities immediately, but she hesitated. I had lost 3 babies before you. 3 pregnancies ended. 3 tiny funerals. When I saw you, so small and perfect, I begged Marco to wait. Just one night, I told him. Just to have you in my arms for a few hours. Silent tears began rolling down Isabel's cheeks. One night turned into 2 days, then a week. Your father arranged documents, registered you as our biological child. It was easier to do in those days, with the connections we had. And then, you became Daniel Martin. Daniel felt a storm of emotions. Anger, confusion, betrayal, and at the same time a strange understanding of the desperation of a woman who had lost so many children. Why didn't you ever tell me? He finally asked, his voice hoarse. Isabel dabbed her tears with a linen napkin. At first it was because you were too young to understand. Then we feared the truth would push you away from us. And as the years went by, it became harder and harder to find the right words. Daniel stood abruptly, walking to the edge of the porch. He needed space, air, and there was never any clue about who left me there. No hint. Isabel shook her head. Just the blankets and the basket. They were of good quality, indicating whoever left you had means. But nothing that could identify them. And no one ever came looking for me. Never, Isabel confirmed. Over time, we assumed maybe your biological parents had died, or they were very young and unable to raise you. Daniel sat back down, his mind racing. Augusta, he murmured to himself. He must be my twin brother. We were born on the same day. We share the same face. But why were we separated? Why was I the one left at your door and not him? Isabel seemed as perplexed as her son. I had no idea there could have been another baby. The basket was small, meant for just one child. A sudden thought struck Daniel. Carmela, is she still alive? Yes, Isabel replied. She retired 15 years ago but still lives in the same neighborhood. I keep in occasional contact with her. I need to talk to her, Daniel decided. Maybe she remembers a detail you and Dad overlooked. Isabel nodded slowly. She was always very observant, more than any of us. Where are the blankets? The basket? Did you keep anything? In the attic, Isabel answered. I kept everything in a trunk. I never had the heart to throw them away, even when your father insisted we destroy all evidence. Daniel stood again, this time with purpose. I need to see those items, and then I'll talk to Carmela. Isabel took his hand, stopping him. Daniel, I'm sorry for not having the courage to tell you sooner, for keeping this secret for so long. Daniel looked at the woman who had raised him, who had loved him as a son his entire life. The anger he felt moments before began to subside, replaced by a deeper understanding. You're my mother, he said simply. That doesn't change. The words seemed to calm Isabel, who nodded with tears in her eyes. The attic door still has the same old lock. The key is in the drawer of my bedside table. And the attic of the Martin mansion was a world apart. Unlike the rest of the house, impeccably decorated and organized, it was a repository of disordered memories. Old furniture covered in sheets, boxes of photographs, childhood toys. Each item told a piece of the family's story. Daniel knew the space well. As a child, He often hid there during the endless parties his parents hosted. Now he saw the place with new eyes. How many other secrets might be tucked away in these shadows? It took almost an hour to find the trunk his mother had mentioned. It was a simple dark wood box, with no adornments or inscriptions, something that wouldn't stand out among so many other family relics. With hesitant hands, he lifted the lid. On top lay a yellowed envelope with his name written in his mother's elegant handwriting. He opened it carefully. "For Daniels, when the time comes." It was a brief letter, written on delicate paper that trembled in his hands. "My dear son, if you are reading this, then I have finally found the courage to share the truth we've hidden for so long. I don't know what age you'll be when you discover it, nor how you'll react. I can only hope you'll understand that every decision we made was driven by the immense love we felt for you from the very first moment. You came into our lives like a miracle when we had lost all hope. The way you arrived was unusual, perhaps even questionable in the eyes of the law. But to a mother with a broken heart, you were a second chance I couldn't refuse. I saved the few belongings that arrived with you, not as a reminder of your origin, but out of respect for a story that began before us. Perhaps someday these objects will help you find answers we can't give. No matter what you discover, know that you will always be our beloved son. Blood may define biology, but love defines family." With all my heart, Mom Daniel took a few minutes to compose himself before delving deeper into the trunk. Underneath the letter, he found exactly what Isabel had described: a set of fine silk blankets in a pale blue hue, delicately embroidered with a floral pattern at the edges. There were no monograms or identifying marks, but the quality of the material was undeniable. Beside the blankets, carefully wrapped in tissue paper, lay a small silver medal. Daniel examined it closely. It was a religious medallion depicting St. Christopher, the protector of travelers. The back bore an inscription so worn it was nearly illegible. Only the letters P and S could be discerned. The last item in the trunk was the basket his mother had mentioned. Small to say, woven from what looked like specially treated wickery, it had a white satin lining inside. At the base, almost invisible, was a tiny label with what appeared to be a baby boutique logo. Daniel photographed each item carefully, then replaced them with the same care his mother had used to preserve them. These objects were his only tangible connections to his unknown past, and now they were invaluable. The Carmela Rojas lived in a small apartment in the Chamberí neighborhood. At 80 years old, she maintained the same energy and clarity she'd had while working for the Martins. She greeted Daniel with genuine joy, hugging him as if he were still the boy running through the mansion hallways. "My Danny, what a wonderful surprise. Isabel called saying you'd be coming, but I still can't believe you're here in my living room. How long has it been?" 2 years? "At least 3, Carmela," Daniel replied, immediately comforted by the familiarity of the woman who had been almost a second mother during his childhood. They sat in the small living room, decorated with family photographs and religious souvenirs. Carmela served coffee and homemade cookies, watching Daniel with attentive eyes. "Isabel told me you finally learned the truth," she said plainly, without beating around the bush. "I always told her she should have told you sooner. Secrets have a peculiar way of surfacing when we least expect them." Daniel nodded, grateful for her frankness. "You were the one who found me that night," he began. "I need to know everything you remember, every detail, no matter how small." Carmela sipped her coffee, her eyes drifting into distant memories. "It was a cold night for March," she began. "Your parents were at an important reception, something related to your father's business. The house was quiet, just me and 2 other employees." She paused, organizing her thoughts. "A little after 10, I heard a noise at the front door. Not exactly a knock, more like a rustling. I thought it was the wind, but something made me check, and there you were, sleeping peacefully, as if that little basket on the doorstep of a mansion was the safest place in the world. Was anyone around? Did you see a car driving away?" Carmela shook her head. "Whoever left you did it quickly and silently. They either knew exactly when the entrance wouldn't be watched, or they were extremely lucky. And there was no letter, no identification. Nothing but those fine blankets and a silver medal around your neck. I remember thinking it was odd. leaving a baby with no name, no history, but such expensive items. Daniel showed Carmela the photos he had taken in the attic. Are these the same blankets and the same medal? The elderly woman examined the images carefully, then nodded. Yes, that's them. The medal was on your neck, hung by a thin chain. She furrowed her brow, concentrating. There was something else, something I didn't tell your parents at the time. Daniel leaned in, anxious. What was it? When I picked you up, I noticed something embroidered on the edge of one of the blankets. It was just initials, 2 letters, D. I remember thinking how curious it was, as if someone already knew you'd become Daniel Martin. A chill ran down Daniel's spine. DM? Are you sure? Absolutely. I didn't mention it to your parents because, well, I thought it might complicate things. They were so happy, so desperate for a child, and those initials felt like a sign, you know? Like fate brought you specifically to that family. But it doesn't make sense, Daniel muttered, more to himself than to Carmela. How could someone know I'd be adopted by a family whose initials matched those on the blanket? Carmela shrugged. Maybe they didn't know, maybe it stood for your real parents, or maybe... She hesitated. Maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Daniel looked at her, intrigued. What do you mean? Your mother, Isabel, had lost 3 babies before you. It wasn't a secret in the high circles of New York society. Maybe whoever left you there knew you'd be taken in and loved. The idea was both disturbing and comforting. It would mean he wasn't simply abandoned, but deliberately placed in the arms of a family desperate for a child. And you never noticed anything suspicious in the weeks before? Anyone watching the house, asking questions about the family? Carmela thought for a moment. No, nothing that caught my attention. But there were so many events at that house, so many people coming and going. Daniel sighed, frustrated by the lack of concrete leads. Carmela, do you think it's possible I was left by someone close to the family? Someone who knew about my parents' situation, who knew about the babies they lost? The elderly woman considered his question seriously. It's possible. The Martins had many connections, socially and in business, and New York, though large, has very insular social circles. She took Daniel's hands in hers, her kind eyes fixed on him. What do you plan to do now, my boy? Daniel took a deep breath before responding. I found a man, Carmela, someone who looks just like me, who was born on the same day, Augusto Vega. I believe he's my twin brother. Carmela's eyes went wide with surprise. My goodness, so there were 2 babies. Yes, but for some reason, we were separated. I need to find out why. I need to understand who made that decision, and why I was the one left at the Martins' door while Augusto stayed with whoever raised him. Carmela squeezed his hands with surprising strength for her age. If there are answers to be found, you will find them, Danny. You've always been determined, even as a child, but remember, she paused meaningfully. Some truths can be painful. Be prepared. Daniel nodded gravely. I've passed the point where ignorance was comfortable, Carmela. I can only move forward now. As he left the small apartment, Daniel felt both closer and farther from his origins. The puzzle pieces of his identity were beginning to fit together, but the complete picture was still far from clear. One thing was certain. He and Augusto were biological brothers, separated by circumstances he still didn't comprehend. And while Daniel was left at the door of a wealthy family, ensuring him a privileged life, Augusto followed a completely different path. The mystery deepened. Why was Daniel left behind? Who had made that decision? He felt he was edging closer to the truth, but knew he needed more answers. The next step was obvious. He needed to return to Augusto, share what he had discovered, and, together, continue searching for the origins they shared. The oncology clinic shone under the morning light. Daniel crossed the main lobby with determined steps, carrying a folder with the photos and information he'd collected in recent days. Lucia and Camilla spotted him before he even reached Augusto's room and ran toward him. "Uncle Daniel!" they exclaimed in unison, hugging his legs with the spontaneous affection only children possess. "Hey there, girls," he said, crouching down to meet them at eye level. "How's your dad today?" "Better," Lucia replied, her eyes sparkling. "The doctor said the new medicine is working." And he ate pudding for breakfast, added Camilla, as though that were the most important sign of recovery. Eleanor appeared in the hallway, her face showing signs of sleepless nights, but with a genuine smile upon seeing Daniel. "They won't stop talking about the uncle who brought them gifts yesterday," she commented, referring to the books and games Daniel had sent to keep them entertained during their father's hospitalization. "Can I talk to Augusto alone for a moment?" Daniel asked, his tone more serious than he intended. Elena nodded, sensing the gravity in his eyes. "Girls, let's go get some hot chocolate in the cafeteria," she suggested, holding out her hands to her daughters. "Your dad and Uncle Daniel need to talk." When he entered the room, Daniel found Augusto sitting up in bed, browsing a book. Although he still looked pale and visibly weak, there was more color in his cheeks. The experimental treatment seemed to be helping. "The man with the big car," Augusto joked upon seeing him closing the book. "My daughters won't stop talking about you and your magical gifts." Daniel smiled, sitting in the chair beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like someone being poisoned in order to be cured," Augusto replied with an ironic smile. "But the doctors seem optimistic." A brief silence fell between them until Daniel finally spoke. "I found out something about us, about our origins." Augusto straightened up, his full attention on Daniel now. "What did you discover?" "I was adopted, or rather, found on the doorstep of the Martins' mansion when I was a newborn. My parents never knew where I came from or who left me." Augusto absorbed the information quietly, his gaze distant. "Your mother never mentioned having another child?" Daniel asked, hoping for a clue. Augusto shook his head. "All my life, I thought I was an only child, never suspected anything else." "Who raised you, Augusto?" "You mentioned a mother." "Carmen Vega," he replied, obvious affection in his voice. "She raised me alone. My father, or the man she said was my father, died before I was born. At least that's what she always told me." "And you believed her?" Augusto frowned, thoughtful. "I always did. I never had a reason to doubt her. But now," he gestured at both of them, "this changes everything, doesn't it?" Daniel nodded, opening the folder he'd brought. "These are the items that came with me that night. A St. Christopher medal, fine blankets, an expensive basket." Augusto examined the photographs carefully. "They don't look familiar," he admitted, returning them. "But my mother, maybe she knows something. Is your mother still alive?" "Yes. She lives in a small town in upstate New York, about an hour from here. She's 78 now, but her mind is as sharp as ever." Daniel's heart pounded. At last, a concrete lead about his origins. "I need to talk to her," he said, determined. "As soon as possible. I'd go with you, but..." Augusto gestured at the medical equipment around him. "I can't leave here for at least 2 more weeks. The treatment requires constant hospitalization at this stage." Daniel considered the situation. Part of him wanted to wait, to make the trip with Augusto, but the urgency to find answers was overwhelming. "I think I need to go alone," he finally decided. "Every day that passes without us knowing the truth is a lost day. And if your mother really knows something..." "I understand," Augusto agreed, though Daniel could see a hint of disappointment in his eyes. "It might be better. If she sees me, she might get defensive. With a stranger, she might feel more comfortable talking." "Are you sure you're okay with that?" Augusto thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, go talk to her. Carmen has always been reserved about my birth. When I asked about my father, her answers were vague, evasive. Maybe there's more to that story than she was willing to tell me. Any idea where I should begin? What should I ask?" "Be direct," Augusto advised. "My mother respects people who go straight to the point. Show her the photos. Tell her what you've discovered. She might be shocked at first, but if she knows something, I believe she'll talk." Daniel wrote down the address Augusto provided, along with some directions on how to reach the small house upstate. "When do you plan to leave?" Augusto asked. "Tomorrow morning," Daniel replied. "I see no reason to delay. You can stay at Miss Pilar's inn. It's simple but clean. Tell her you're my friend and she'll take good care of you." As Daniel rose to leave, Augusto grasped his arm. "Daniel, thanks. Not just for the treatment, but for seeking these answers, for wanting to find out who we are. "We're brothers," Daniel answered simply. "In some way, I've always felt like something was missing in my life. Now I know what it was." The two men shared a moment of silent understanding. Despite having grown up in completely different worlds, an invisible bond united them, one that was now beginning to take form and substance. "Keep your phone close," Daniel advised. "I'll call as soon as I learn anything." Augusto nodded. "And don't let her change the subject," he added. "My mother is a master at dodging questions when she doesn't want to answer something." As Daniel left the room, he found Elena and the twins in the hallway, the little ones savoring their hot drinks. "Everything all right?" Elena asked, concern obvious on her face. "Yes," he replied, offering a reassuring smile. "Actually, it might be about to get even better. I'm heading upstate tomorrow to speak with Augusto's mother." "Alone?" Elena asked, surprised. "Augusto can't leave his treatment now, and I feel like I can't wait. Every day matters." Elena studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "If you find something that helps us understand this connection between you, well, that's important for all of us." Leaving the clinic in the bright sunlight, Daniel felt a renewed sense of determination. The truth was close, hidden in the memories of a woman who raised one of the twins while the other was left at strangers' doors. Why this choice? What motivated the separation? Tomorrow, perhaps, he would begin to uncover the answers. The small town in upstate New York seemed frozen in time. Narrow stone streets, old houses with flower-adorned balconies, and a church dominating the main square formed a nearly idyllic backdrop. Daniel parked his car at the village entrance, preferring to walk the rest of the way, following Augusto's directions. Carmen Vega's home was at the end of a quiet road, slightly removed from the other houses. It was a simple two-story building, painted white, with window boxes filled with red geraniums. A small, well-tended garden spread out front, revealing the owner's dedication. Daniel hesitated before knocking. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind the entire trip, but now, at the threshold of finding answers, he felt strangely vulnerable. Taking a deep breath, he knocked 3 times. Slow footsteps approached from the other side, and the door opened, revealing a short elderly woman with grey hair in a simple bun and penetrating dark eyes. She wore an apron over a modest dress, her hands lightly stained with soil, as if interrupted while gardening. "Yes," she asked, studying the elegantly dressed stranger at her door. Daniel felt his heart race. Though there was no physical resemblance, something in those dark eyes struck him with unexpected force. They were the same eyes as Augusto's, and the same as the twins. "Ms. Carmen Vega?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" Following Augusto's advice, Daniel decided to be direct. "My name is Daniel Martin. I recently met your son, Augusto." The woman's face lit up with a warm smile. "Oh, you're a friend of my Augusto. He didn't tell me he was expecting a visitor. Come in, please." Daniel followed Carmen inside. The interior was simple but very clean and welcoming. Family photos lined the walls, many of Augusto at various ages, and more recent ones with the twins. Carmen led him into a small living room, gesturing to a couch while she sat in a comfortable-looking armchair. "Is Augusto all right? It's been a few weeks since I last saw him." "He mentioned he was undergoing a new treatment," she said, a hint of worry crossing her face. "Yes, he's responding well to the treatment," Daniel reassured her. "The girls are doing great too." Carmen visibly relaxed, though her brow soon furrowed in confusion. "Forgive me, but how did you meet my son? Augusto doesn't usually mention friends like you." Daniel sensed her hesitation as she took in his expensive suit and watch, obvious signs of a social gap between him and Augusto's usual circle. "Our story is a bit unusual," he began, choosing his words carefully. "I only met Augusto 2 weeks ago in a very unexpected way." Carmen watched him attentively, waiting for him to continue. "Miss Vega, what I'm about to say will sound extraordinary, but please hear me out." Slowly, Daniel opened the folder he'd brought, first removing a recent photo of him and Augusto side by side at the hospital. The resemblance was unmistakable, despite Augusto's pallor from illness. Carmen took the photo with trembling hands. Her face lost its color gradually, eyes wide, fixed on the picture. For several seconds, she remained silent. "Impossible," she finally whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice, only a sense of shock that seemed to drain her strength. "I was born on March 15th, and the same as Augusto," Daniel continued softly. "I recently discovered I was left at the doorstep of a mansion in New York when I was a newborn. The family that found me decided to raise me." Carmen closed her eyes tightly, as if trying to shut out the reality confronting her. When she opened them again, they were tearful. "How did you find us?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "By chance, Augusto's daughters approached me on the street, asking for help to pay for his treatment. When I first saw Augusto—" "Those girls," Carmen murmured, shaking her head. "So impulsive, like their dad." She returned the photo with trembling hands and rose slowly, walking to an old china cabinet in the corner of the room. From a lower drawer, she took out a small carved wooden box. When she sat down again, her movements were that of someone carrying a heavy burden. 35 years carrying this secret," she said, placing the box on the coffee table. 35 years waking up every morning with the same question, "Did I make the right choice?" Daniel watched silently as she opened the box with careful fingers. From inside it, she removed a small wrapped bundle of cloth. Unfolding it, she revealed a medal identical to the one Daniel had in the photos, St. Christopher in aged silver. "There were two," she explained. "One for each baby. Splitting them would be bad luck, so I left one with you." The confirmation hit Daniel hard, even though he expected it. This woman, this humble person with work-worn hands and a weary gaze, was his biological mother. "So it's true," he said, his voice strangely calm. "You're my mother." Carmen lifted her eyes to meet his, and what Daniel saw there were decades of contained pain, silent guilt and unspoken love. I thought I'd never see you again," she said, voice quavering as tears finally streamed down her wrinkled cheeks. "So many times I imagined your face, wondered if you were okay, if you were happy." Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He'd imagined this moment countless ways, with anger, accusations, demands for explanations. But in the face of this woman's obvious suffering, all he felt was deep compassion. "Why, Carmen?" he asked simply. "Why separate us?" She wiped her tears with the corner of her apron and took a deep breath, as if preparing to finally set down a burden she had carried for far too long. "I was very young," she began. "Only $19, working as a maid in a wealthy family's home in New York. Their eldest son returned from college abroad during the summer. We were young, reckless. By the time I found out I was pregnant, he'd already gone back to his studies." Carmen paused, gathering the strength to continue. "I told his parents, hoping, I don't know what, compassion, maybe. They fired me the same day, said their son had a bright future ahead, that I was just a distraction. They offered me money to go away quietly." "Did you accept it?" "No," she replied with unexpected dignity. "I refused the money and returned here to this small town, to my parents' house. They took me in, though they felt shame at having an unmarried pregnant daughter back then." Daniel nodded, encouraging her to continue. "When I discovered it was twins during the birth, I nearly lost hope. How could I raise two children alone, with no resources, no husband? My parents were old, barely supporting themselves." She ran her fingers over the medal in her hand, as if its touch brought the memories more vividly. "For weeks, I tried. I swear I tried. I nursed you both, slept only when you slept. But things got worse. No money for enough food, no money for diapers. Augusto got sick, then you did. The doctor said without proper care." Her voice trailed off there, but she gathered herself again. "One night, I made the hardest decision of my life. If I couldn't give both of you a decent life, maybe I could save at least one. I remembered the Martin family, not my former employers, but I knew them by sight. I knew they couldn't have children, that the wife cried around the house because of it. They were wealthy. They could give you everything I never could." Daniel listened intently, understanding the pain and logic behind her choice. "So, unable to raise both sons, I made a desperate decision. I kept Augusto and left you on the mansion's doorstep, hoping you'd have a better future. I put the medal on you so that, if fate ever wanted it, you could find each other." Tears now streamed freely down her aged face. "I've been tormented by guilt ever since. Every one of Augusto's birthdays, I wondered how you were celebrating yours. Every Christmas, I imagined the gifts you might be getting. Not a day went by that I didn't think of you, wondering if I'd done the right thing." A heavy silence filled the small room. Carmen seemed to have aged 10 years just by reliving these memories. Daniel processed it all, feeling a swirl of emotions: grief for the separation, empathy for a desperate young mother, gratitude for finally knowing the truth. "Why did you choose Augusto to stay with you?" he finally asked. "Why not me?" Carmen gave a sad smile. "I didn't choose. Until the last moment, I didn't know which of you I'd let go. But on the night I made the decision, you were sleeping soundly while Augusto was crying non-stop. I thought it would be easier to leave with a sleeping baby, a decision made in the desperation of the moment." Daniel let out a ragged sigh. Such a small detail, a baby sleeping, another crying, had determined the entire course of their lives. "And what about our father?" He never knew. "I tried to contact him one last time before separating you. I found out he'd married a young woman from a good family and was building a political career. My letter was returned unopened." Daniel nodded, absorbing this information. There was no resentment in his voice when he asked, "What was his name?" "Francisco Alvarez," Carmen answered. "I don't know what happened to him after that. I never tried to find out again." Daniel recognized the name. It belonged to a former government official, now deceased. The irony didn't escape him. While he grew up as the son of an influential family, his biological father had been part of the same social circle, completely unaware of his son's existence. Gazing at the woman before him, Daniel realized there was no room for bitterness, only understanding. What Carmen had done was an act of desperation and, in its own way, of love, a sacrifice that cost her decades of silent pain. "Does Augusto know all of this?" he asked gently. "No," Carmen said, shaking her head. "I always told him his father had died before he was born. I never had the courage to tell him about you." Daniel took her work-hardened hands in his, feeling the rough texture. "Thank you for telling me the truth now," he said simply. Carmen looked into his eyes, tears glistening. "Do you hate me?" she whispered. "No," Daniel replied sincerely. "How could I? You did what you believed was best for your children, even though it meant a tremendous sacrifice for you." A sob escaped Carmen's lips, as if those words had finally freed something locked in her chest for decades. "Augusto is sick," Daniel continued, "but the treatment is working. I'm making sure he gets the best care. Will you tell him about me?" "About what I did?" Daniel considered her question for a moment. "I think he deserves to know the truth, but we can do it together when he's ready." Carmen nodded, gratitude evident in her tired gaze. "And what about you?" she asked hesitantly. "After you walk out that door, will we see each other again?" The question hit Daniel deeply. With the truth now out, he realized he wanted more than just answers. He wanted to reclaim lost time. More than just providing financial support for Augusto and his family, he wanted to be part of their lives. And that included this humble woman who, despite her difficult choices, had never stopped loving him from afar. "Yes," he answered, gently squeezing her hands. "We'll see each other again. After all, we have many stories to share, right?" The smile that lit up Carmen's weary face was like a ray of sunlight after decades of storm, tentative at first, then radiant in its pure joy. In that moment, in the small living room of a simple house in upstate New York, something broken began to mend, not to return to what it once was, for that was impossible, but to form something new, carrying the scars of the past, along with the hope of the future. Autumn had already given way to winter in New York by the time Augusto was finally discharged from the clinic. 3 months of intensive treatment had paid off, not a definitive cure, but a significant remission that doctors deemed promising. The color had returned to his face and, although he was still thinner than usual, His energy grew each day. Daniel waited in the clinic's lobby, watching the twins run around, excited at the prospect of finally taking their father home. Lucia and Camilla had become an essential part of his life these past months. Their daily visits, their colorful drawings, their endless stories about school and their friends. "They're out of control today," Elena commented, approaching with a tired but happy smile. "They didn't sleep well, anxious about this moment." "I can imagine," Daniel smiled. "And you? How are you holding up?" "Relieved, hopeful." She watched her daughters for a moment, and a bit nervous about what's next. "Augusto will still need care, frequent checkups." "You don't need to worry about any of that," Daniel assured her. "Everything's arranged." Before Elena could reply, the elevator doors opened and Augusto appeared, accompanied by a nurse pushing a wheelchair, a standard hospital protocol for discharging patients, even if they could walk. "Daddy!" the twins shouted in unison, running to hug him. Augusto smiled, bending down to receive them, ignoring the wheelchair offered. Daniel noted how much younger his brother looked when he smiled, the resemblance between them even more evident in such moments. "Shall we go home?" Lucia asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Augusto and Elena exchanged a hesitant glance. In recent weeks, they'd talked many times about the future, about how to rearrange their lives after the illness. The small apartment they'd been living in posed challenges for Augusto's recovery. 4 flights of stairs with no elevator, a single bedroom, damp walls that could compromise his still fragile immune system. "Actually," Daniel intervened, "I have a surprise for you." The twins turned to him, instantly intrigued. "A surprise?" Camilla asked, eyes wide. "What is it?" "You'll see soon," Daniel smiled, gesturing for them to follow. "My driver is waiting." In the parking lot, a spacious van awaited them instead of the limousine Daniel usually used. The change didn't go unnoticed by Augusto, who raised an inquiring eyebrow at his brother. "I thought we'd be more comfortable this way," Daniel explained. "Plus, there's someone else waiting for us." A puzzled look crossed Augusto's face, but he asked no more questions as they all climbed into the van. During the drive, the twins kept everyone entertained with their lively chatter, describing in detail how they had decorated their father's room for his return. Elena looked nervous, wringing her hands in her lap as if sensing something important was about to happen. Daniel stared out the window, his thoughts drifting to the past months. Since discovering his twin brother and meeting Carmen, his life had changed drastically. The projects that once seemed so important now took on a new perspective. Long hours at the office had given way to hospital visits, afternoons playing with his nieces, conversations with Augusto about books, music, and the decades they hadn't shared. "We're going the wrong way," Augusto noted, interrupting Daniel's thoughts. "Our apartment is in the opposite direction." "We're not going back to your old apartment," Daniel said simply. The van now turned into a pleasant residential area with large houses and well-kept gardens. Not the exclusive suburb where Daniel lived, but a comfortable middle-class neighborhood with good schools and lush parks. "Daniel, what's going on?" Elena asked, her voice tense. Before he could reply, the van stopped in front of a 2-story house with terracotta-colored walls and a small front garden. A discreet ramp beside the entrance steps suggested recent adaptations. "We're here," Daniel announced, stepping out and opening the door for the others. The twins were first out, looking around curiously. Augusto and Elena followed, confusion clear on their faces. "Daniel, what is this place?" Augusto asked. In response, Daniel took a set of keys from his pocket and handed them to his brother. "Your new home. If you'll accept it, of course." A stunned silence followed, broken only by the excited exclamations of the twins, who were already exploring the garden, marveling at a small fountain with colorful fish. "We can't accept this," Elena said automatically, though her eyes betrayed her fascination with the house. "Please," Daniel insisted. "Don't think of it as a gift if that makes you uncomfortable. Consider it an investment in Augusto's health. The doctors were clear about the need for a suitable environment for his recovery." Augusto held the keys as if they were fragile and precious. "Daniel, this is too much." "It's the least I can do," Daniel corrected him. "After everything we've discovered," After all the lost time, I want you to have stability and security. More than that, I want us to be a real family." The front door opened before Augusto could respond. A familiar figure stood in the doorway. Carmen, dressed simply but with a special sparkle in her eyes. "Mom!" Augusto exclaimed in surprise. "What are you doing here?" The twins, seeing their grandmother, ran to hug her with the same energy they'd shown their father. Carmen received them with kisses and exclamations of affection before stepping toward the group gathered near the van. "Your brother invited me," she explained, casting Daniel a glance of gratitude and slight nervousness. "He said it would be a special surprise for your discharge." In the past few months, since the revelation in upstate New York, Carmen had met with Daniel and Augusto multiple times. Their initial meetings were challenging, filled with conflicting emotions, especially for Augusto, who had to process not only the existence of a twin brother, but also the truth about his birth and why they were separated. Carmen approached her son, touching his face gently. "How are you feeling?" "Better every day," he replied, covering her hand with his. "But I didn't know you were coming to New York." "I invited her to live here too," Daniel explained. "The house has a separate apartment in the back with its own entrance. I thought it would be good to have an extra adult to help with the girls while you and Elena handled treatment and work." Carmen exchanged a look with her son, seeking his approval. "I only agreed because he insisted," she said. "He said you'd need help during recovery, but if you'd rather I go back to the village—" "No," Augusto interrupted, clasping his mother's hands. "I'd like you to stay. The girls would miss you." What went unspoken yet understood by all was that Augusto himself would miss her. Despite the painful truth about his birth, the bond between mother and son remained strong. "Can we go in now?" asked Lucia, tugging on Daniel's sleeve. "We want to see our rooms." "Did you two already know about this?" Elena asked, surprised. "Uncle Daniel showed us pictures," Camilla admitted. "But he made us promise to keep it a secret." Daniel shrugged, smiling at Elena's reproachful look. "I needed accomplices." Finally, they all entered the house. The interior was spacious and welcoming, furnished with new but comfortable pieces. A large living area opened into a dining room and a kitchen filled with modern appliances. Upstairs, 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms provided plenty of space for everyone. The twins explored every corner with cries of wonder and excitement, especially when they discovered their rooms were decorated according to their preferences. An ocean theme for Lucia and forest motifs for Camila. "When did you do all this?" Augusto asked, noting each detail that revealed the care taken in preparing the house. "Over the past few weeks," Daniel replied, "with Carmen's help and a few hints I got from the girls." Elena seemed unable to believe her eyes. Tears brimmed as she took in the small details that made the house feel homey. Books on the shelves, already framed family photos on the walls, plants that brought life to the space. "Daniel, I don't know how to thank you," she finally said. "This is more than we could have ever dreamed of." "No need to thank me," he answered simply. "You're my family. The only family I have, one really." In the weeks following Isabel's sudden passing during Augusto's treatment, Daniel felt, for the first time, the true meaning of loneliness. The Martin mansion, previously just spacious, became oppressively empty. That was when the idea of a new house began to form, not just as a more suitable place for Augusto's recovery, but as an opportunity to forge stronger bonds with the family he'd only recently discovered. While everyone explored the house, Carmen approached Daniel, her eyes reflecting a mix of emotions. "I never imagined we'd all be together like this one day," she said softly, so only he could hear. "It's like a dream that took a while to come true," Daniel replied. Carmen nodded, looking at Augusto, who was checking out the little library in the corner of the living room, already pointing out titles he recognized to Elena. "I know I'll never make up for lost time," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "But I want to be part of your lives now." Daniel placed his hand over hers, feeling the aged skin. "We're only beginning," he assured her. "We have a lot of time ahead." That evening, their first dinner in the new house, the dining room table was full. Augusto and Elena sat at the heads of the table, with the twins and Carmen on one side, Daniel on the other. The meal, prepared by Carmen with enthusiastic help from the girls, was simple but delicious. Traditional recipes she used to cook for Augusto as a child. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by the girls' laughter and stories shared by everyone. Daniel observed the scene with a sense of wholeness he had never experienced before. Although his former adult life had been filled with professional success and material comfort, there was always a void he couldn't name. Now, sitting at the table with his brother, nieces, G's, and biological mother, he finally felt complete. After dinner, once the girls were in bed and Elena was helping Carmen tidy up the kitchen, the two brothers stepped out to the small backyard patio. The night was cool, the sky unusually clear for the city. "How have you been dealing with Isabel?" Augusto asked after a few moments of companionable silence. "It's been a month today, right?" Daniel nodded, grateful for his brother's sensitivity in remembering the date. "It's strange," he admitted. "On one hand, I miss her terribly. On the other, I'm still dealing with the anger of her withholding the truth for so many years." "She loved you like a son," Augusto observed. "That's undeniable." "Yes, and that's why I try to hold on to the good memories. She did what she thought was best." Another silence settled in, each man lost in his own thoughts. The discovery of the truth had brought answers, but also new questions, emotional adjustments for all. "And you?" Daniel finally asked. "How do you feel about all of this?" "About me, the truth of our birth, about Carmen." Augusto considered his response carefully. "At first, it was like having the ground pulled from under my feet. I questioned everything I believed about my life, my identity." He paused, searching for the right words. "But then I realized nothing that truly matters had changed. I'm still my daughter's father. I still love and am loved by the same family. We've just expanded." Daniel smiled at the simplicity and depth of that answer. "And Carmen," he prodded gently. "That part was complicated," Augusto admitted. "For a few weeks, I was angry about the lies, about the brother I never knew I had. But then I started to understand the impossible dilemma she faced. Alone, without resources, with two newborns. She did the best she could under the circumstances," Daniel said. "Exactly. And looking back, I see she always was an extraordinary mother, despite the limitations. I never lacked love or support." From where they stood, they could see Carmen and Elena in the kitchen window, an ordinary domestic scene that, in truth, represented something profound, the gradual merging of two families into one. Little by little, she's learning to make new memories with the children she once had to separate, Augusto noted, his eyes on his mother. "And we're learning how to build a future together, one day at a time." Daniel nodded in full agreement. The months since he'd first encountered the twins on the street had brought more changes than his previous 35 years, and though there was still pain and healing to do, there was also an undeniable promise of better days. To ensure a better future for Augusto and his family, Daniel had bought them a new house. But what he had truly accomplished was far more precious, rebuilding a family that fate had torn apart and securing a chance at new beginnings for them all. As he watched his brother under the soft patio light, Daniel knew with absolute certainty that all the fortunes in the world couldn't buy what he had found that autumn in New York, a place to call home, people to call family, a future to build together. Spring arrived in New York in a burst of color and fragrance. The garden of the Vega family's new home bloomed under Carmen's attentive care, transformed into an oasis of flowers and herbs. The twins loved helping their grandmother, always returning inside with muddy hands and proud smiles at each new blossom. 5 months had passed since the move to the new house. Life seemed to have found a peaceful and promising rhythm. Augusto responded well to the treatment and had even managed to return to teaching part-time at the university. Elena continued as a nurse, now at a hospital closer to home, allowing her to spend more time with the family. The twins adapted quickly to their new school, making friends and charming their teachers with their intelligence and creativity. Daniel visited them nearly every day. More than a benefactor, he had truly become part of the family. Sunday dinners turned into a tradition, with everyone gathering around the table to share weekly updates. For someone who had spent most of his adult life nearly alone, focused solely on business. Those moments represented a precious discovery, the feeling of belonging, of having a place where he was welcomed simply for being himself. One April morning, Daniel accompanied Augusto to yet another routine checkup at the clinic. They planned to have lunch afterward, maybe visit a new contemporary art exhibit that had just opened downtown. Augusto seemed well, his complexion normal again, his weight almost back to normal. Even the hair he'd lost during chemotherapy had started to grow back. "How are things at the university?" Daniel asked as they waited in the clinic's reception area. "Surprisingly good," Augusto replied. "The students have been wonderful. They organized a welcome-back reception for me, with banners and everything. Pretty embarrassing," he added with a grin, "but very moving. And your book. Have you managed to make progress?" Augusto had been working for years on a book about contemporary American literature, a project his illness had forced him to pause. "Yes, finally. The publisher agreed to extend my deadline to next year, giving me enough time to finish the last 2 chapters. Their conversation was interrupted when a nurse called Augusto's name. Daniel promised to wait right there, already skimming a magazine on architecture while his brother went for the exams. Time passed faster than he expected, lost in thought and the occasional article. It was only when nearly 2 hours had gone by that concern set in. Routine checkups never took that long. He stood up, heading toward the information desk, when he spotted Dr. Morales, the oncologist who had overseen Augusto's treatment from the start. "Mr. Martin," the doctor called, his expression far too serious for Daniel's comfort. "Would you come to my office? I'd like to discuss your brother's exam results." Daniel felt his chest tighten, that unmistakable sense that something was wrong. He followed the doctor down the silent hallway, trying to read his expression for any clues. In the office, he found Augusto already seated, pale-faced, his eyes fixed somewhere beyond the window. Only then did Daniel realize something was seriously amiss. "Please have a seat," Dr. Morales indicated, settling behind his desk. He waited for Daniel to sit beside his brother before continuing. "As you know, we've been closely monitoring Augusto's response to the treatment over the past months. Initially, we saw very encouraging results. The implied but hung in the air like a dark cloud. However, these latest tests show that the disease is starting to progress again," the doctor went on, his tone professional but kind. "The cancer cells have developed resistance to the protocol we were using." Daniel looked at Augusto, who remained silent as if he had already heard this part of the conversation. "What are the options?" Daniel asked, his mind already switching to problem-solving mode, as it always did in crises. Dr. Morales clasped his fingers on the desk, choosing his words carefully. "We can try other chemotherapy protocols, but given the resistance now evident, the chances of success significantly decrease." "What about beyond chemotherapy?" Daniel pressed. "There must be other approaches, experimental treatments, and something—" "There is one option," the doctor agreed, "which I believe is the most promising at this stage." He paused, looking directly at Augusto and then at Daniel. "Augusto needs a bone marrow transplant. Without it, his condition may worsen rapidly in the coming weeks." The news hit Daniel like a punch. "A transplant? A compatible donor? All the complexities and risks involved. What's the likelihood of finding a compatible donor?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Normally, we start by looking among siblings, since that offers a roughly 25% chance of compatibility. In your case, being identical twins means near-perfect compatibility." "You're genetically identical." Daniel exchanged a glance with Augusto, who finally seemed to snap out of his silent trance. "You'd be the ideal donor," the doctor explained to Daniel. "But I must stress, it's an important decision. The procedure isn't simple. It involves anesthesia, post-operative pain, a few days of recovery." "I'll do it," Daniel replied immediately, without hesitation. "When can we start testing?" Dr. Morales looked slightly taken aback by his quick response. "We need to confirm compatibility with specific analyses, even in identical twins. It's just protocol, but essential. We also need a thorough evaluation of your health to ensure you're fit to donate." "Then let's do it right away," Daniel insisted. "Today, if possible." "Daniel," Augusto finally interjected, his voice low, You need to think about this. Understand what's involved. There's nothing to think about, Daniel said, turning to face his brother. You'd do the same for me. Dr. Morales observed the interaction with both clinical and human interest. I suggest you both talk it over calmly. We can schedule the preliminary tests for tomorrow, which gives you time. No, Daniel interrupted firmly. If there are any tests we can do today, I want to do them. Every day counts, right? The doctor nodded slowly, recognizing the determination in Daniel's eyes. There are a few basic tests we can do right now. I'll arrange for you to be seen immediately. When the doctor left to make arrangements, the brothers were left alone in the office. A heavy silence fell. You don't have to do this, Augusto said at last. Yes, I do, Daniel answered simply, and I want to. We've only known each other for a year, and they've been the most meaningful months of my life, Daniel finished. Besides, we share the same DNA. Technically, we've known each other since conception. The attempt at humor elicited a faint smile from Augusto. How will we tell Elena and the girls? Augusto asked, worry evident in his voice. They thought the worst was over. With honesty, Daniel replied, but also with hope. Because we do have a real reason for hope, Augusto. If the doctor is right, I'm the perfect donor for you. The following days were an emotional roller coaster. As Daniel had anticipated, Eleanor received the news with the composure of someone who understood medical realities, but also the fear of losing the man she loved. The twins were spared the scarier details, told only that their father needed a special medicine that Uncle Daniel could provide. Carmen, however, carried extra guilt, believing that somehow separating the twins at birth might have contributed to Augusto's illness. Daniel spent hours reassuring her that leukemia had nothing to do with the past and was simply a cruel twist of fate. As expected, the tests confirmed a perfect match between the twins. Daniel underwent a battery of exams confirming his excellent health, ironically, in better shape than most men his age, thanks to recent lifestyle changes prompted by his newfound family. 2 weeks after the initial diagnosis, Daniel found himself in a hospital room, preparing for the bone marrow extraction procedure. Augusto had already been hospitalized for 3 days, undergoing an intense chemotherapy regimen to eliminate his diseased marrow before receiving his brother's. Nervous? Asked the nurse as she checked his vitals. A little, Daniel admitted, but mostly anxious for everything to go well. It's a beautiful thing you're doing for your brother, she commented, adjusting the heart monitor. Not all relatives agree so readily. He'd do the same for me, Daniel replied, echoing his earlier statement to the doctor. It was a certainty he carried, even though he'd only known Augusto for such a short time. When the doctors came to wheel him into the procedure room, he found Eleanor waiting in the hallway. I came to wish you luck, she said, giving him a brief hug, and to say thank you, again. Take care of the girls, he replied, trying to keep a light tone. Tell them Uncle Daniel will bring ice cream when this is all done. Elena nodded, her eyes shining with tears she tried to hold back. Augusto asked me to tell you something, she added. He said, tell him now we'll have even more in common. Daniel smiled, understanding the reference. After this procedure, Augusto would literally carry part of Daniel inside him, his blood cells, his marrow. Are you sure about this, Daniel? Elena asked one last time, her voice gentle. Absolutely, he replied without hesitation. He's my brother, there's no question. And the surgery was a success, both for Daniel and for Augusto. The marrow collection went smoothly, and Augusto's infusion took place without adverse reactions. Now came the most critical phase, waiting to see if his body would accept the new cells and begin producing healthy blood. During recovery, Daniel spent more time than ever at the family's house. Although his own recovery was relatively quick, a few days of discomfort and localized pain, he chose to stay close to his brother, who faced a far more delicate and risky process. The twins became his unofficial nurses, insisting on bringing him water, extra pillows, or simply sitting beside him to tell stories or show him their latest drawings. Uncle Daniel, look what I made, Camilla announced one afternoon, presenting a colorful picture. It's us at the park when you get better. Daniel studied the artwork with the utmost seriousness. Stick figures represented the whole family, Elena and Augusto holding hands, Carmen nearby, and the twins between Daniel and Augusto. All of them had enormous smiles. "It's beautiful, Camilla," he said sincerely. "I'm going to hang it in my office." "Really?" she asked, her eyes shining. "Cross my heart," he promised, feeling a wave of affection at how natural uncle sounded now. Camilla, once more reserved than her sister, now called him uncle as effortlessly as breathing. It warmed his heart in ways he never imagined possible. In the days that followed, while Augusto remained isolated in the hospital, shielded from any infection as his immune system rebuilt, Daniel took on an even more active role in the family. He drove the girls to school, helped with homework, learned to cook simple meals with Carmen, and even accompanied Elena on her daily visits to Augusto whenever the children stayed under their grandmother's care. One evening, after putting the twins to bed, Daniel found Carmen on the back porch, gazing at the stars while sipping a cup of tea. "They're finally asleep," she asked, offering him a chair beside her. "After 3 stories and a promise that tomorrow we'll go to the zoo," Daniel confirmed with a tired but contented sigh. Carmen observed him with a gentle smile. "You're good with them." "They make it easy," he answered modestly. "They're extraordinary kids." They fell silent for a few moments, enjoying the calmness of the night. "You know," Carmen began, speaking thoughtfully, "when I left you at that mansion so many years ago, my biggest fear was that you'd grow up in a cold family that gave you material things but not love." Daniel considered her words carefully. "Isabel and Marco were good parents in their way," he replied. "I never lacked affection, even if they showed it in more reserved ways. Yet, you have such a capacity to love, to give of yourself," Carmen observed. "Look at everything you've done for Augusto and for the girls. It's not just about money, it's about family. A real family." Daniel recognized the truth in her statement. He wasn't just providing financial help, he was truly becoming part of that family. Every bedtime story for his nieces, every conversation with Carmen about the past, every planning session with Elena about Augusto's future care, all of it was transforming him, integrating him, completing him in ways he'd never experienced. "They are my family," he said simply. "You all are my family." Carmen nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Augusto is going to be fine," she said with a mother's unwavering conviction. "Because of you, my son has a second chance." "We all have a second chance," Daniel corrected her gently. "A chance to be the family we should have always been." In the quiet of that starry evening, Daniel felt a peace he had never known before. The path ahead was still uncertain. Augusto's recovery would be long and potentially complicated, but he felt an unshakable certainty in his heart. He was no longer alone, and never would be again. Summer arrived in New York in all its intensity. The city's dry heat drove people to seek any available shade, and the Vega family's garden was no exception. The large tree in the center of the backyard offered perfect shelter from the relentless August sun, and beneath it, a table was set for Sunday lunch. 6 months had passed since the transplant, and Augusto's recovery exceeded all medical expectations. His body accepted Daniel's cells without complications, and his latest exams showed no sign of the disease. Though doctors still spoke cautiously of remission rather than cure, there was tangible optimism at each appointment. Daniel arrived punctually for lunch, as he did every Sunday, carrying a bottle of red wine and a mysterious package he handed directly to Carmen, instructing her to hide it until after dessert. The matriarch smiled conspiratorially, storing the package in the pantry, before returning to the final meal preparations. Uncle Daniel. The twins sprinted toward him as soon as they saw him enter the garden. Even at 5, their distinct personalities were clear. Lucia, endlessly energetic and insatiably curious. Camilla, more observant and thoughtful but equally affectionate. "Did you bring a surprise?" Lucia asked, trying to peek into his pockets. "You're always suspicious of me," Daniel joked, pretending to be offended. "Because you always bring something," Camilla answered with the flawless logic of a child. "Not today," Daniel lied with a smile that revealed the opposite. "I came just to enjoy your company." Augusto watched them from the table, where he was helping Elena arrange the silverware. The sun highlighted the grey threads that had appeared prematurely in his beard after treatment, but it also illuminated the healthy smile on his face. He looked younger, lighter, as if each day of recovery chipped away at both illness and old worries. "They've got you wrapped around their little fingers," he teased, walking over to hug his brother. "Like you're any different," Daniel retorted. "I saw the new toys in their room. Who's responsible for that?" Augusto shrugged, a guilty grin on his lips. "They deserved a reward. They got excellent grades this semester." "Right," Daniel said, not hiding his amusement. "Totally educational." The two brothers walked together to the table, where Carmen was directing the placement of dishes with the calm authority of someone who had spent a lifetime feeding those she loved. The table overflowed with color and aroma, a hearty family meal, fresh salad made with vegetables from the garden, homemade bread still warm, and a variety of side dishes prepared by Elena. "It all looks wonderful," Daniel praised, inhaling the scents mixing in the warm air. "You say that every Sunday," Elena noted, pouring cold water with lemon slices. "And every Sunday it's true," he replied simply. Once everyone was seated around the table, a spontaneous moment of silence settled, comfortable, not awkward, when people who love each other pause to feel gratitude for being together. Carmen broke the silence, raising her glass in a toast. To health. And to family. They all lifted their glasses, including the twins with their small cups of orange juice, clinking them at the center of the table with genuine smiles. Those two words, health and family, carried deep meaning for each of them, for reasons they didn't need to explain. The meal continued with the friendly familiarity they'd developed over the past months. Conversations overlapped, stories were told, plans made. Augusto talked about returning full-time to the university next semester. Elena mentioned a promotion at the hospital. The twins animatedly discussed the ballet lessons they would start in September. Daniel observed it all with a sense of wonder that still surprised him. Belonging. He who had spent his adult life building walls around himself, surrounded by luxury but seldom genuine affection, now found himself fully integrated into this family that fate had returned to him so unexpectedly. "What are you thinking?" Carmen asked, noticing his contemplative silence. "How life can turn around," he answered honestly. "A year ago, I didn't even know you existed." Carmen nodded, understanding the depth behind his simple words. "And now we can't imagine our Sundays without you," she added, her gaze filled with contained emotion. After dessert, a caramel flan that was Elena's specialty, the children asked permission to play in the garden. Augusto decided to join them, creating an impromptu treasure hunt with clues he wrote on tiny pieces of paper scattered throughout the yard. Daniel, Carmen, and Elena stayed at the table, sipping freshly made coffee and watching the scene as Augusto ran around the garden, chased by the twins' shrieks of laughter. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself," Elena said, her eyes on her husband, "to see him like this, so alive. The doctors say that after 6 months, the chance of relapse goes down significantly," Daniel reminded her, though he knew Eleanor, being a nurse, was well aware of the stats. "I know," she replied with a grateful smile, "but there are still moments when the fear comes back, you know, when I wake up in the middle of the night just to check if he's breathing normally." Carmen covered Eleanor's hand with her own, a silent gesture of solidarity. The two women had become close, Carmen, the mother-in-law who'd never had a daughter-in-law, Eleanor, who'd lost her mother as a teenager. They filled voids in each other's lives in ways that transcended traditional family definitions. "I think now is the perfect time for that surprise," Carmen suggested, glancing at Daniel with a raised eyebrow. Daniel nodded, standing to retrieve the mysterious package he'd brought. When he returned, he called Augusto and the girls over to the table again. "What's this?" asked Augusto, intrigued, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Something I've been planning for a while," Daniel replied, handing the package to Carmen, "but I think it's only fair that our mother do the honors." Carmen accepted the package with slightly trembling hands. Her eyes met Daniel's for a moment, a silent question in them. He nodded encouragingly. Carefully, she unwrapped the package, revealing a leather-bound photo album. Embossed in gold on the cover, the words, "Our family," gleamed in the sunlight. "Oh," she said softly, opening the album with reverence. On the first page, an old sepia photograph, a young Carmen holding a baby in her arms. Augusto, just a few weeks old. On the opposite page, another photo from the same era, Isabel and Marco Martin with baby Daniel. "How did you find this?" Augusto asked, leaning in for a better look. "I found it among Isabel's belongings after she passed," Daniel explained. "And the photo of you well, Carmen helped me." Turning the pages, the album followed two parallel timelines. On one side, Augusto growing up under Carmen's care. On the other, Daniel in the Martin mansion. Childhood, adolescence, early adulthood, separate lives, but tied by blood. Then, reaching the final pages, the two lines merged. The unexpected meeting, the first pictures together at the hospital, the move to the new house, the transplant, the recovery. The family reunited at last. "There are still plenty of blank pages at the end," Carmen noted, her voice thick with emotion. "So we can keep filling them," Daniel explained simply. Together, Lucia and Camilla squeezed between the adults, fascinated by the photographs of their parents and uncle as children. They giggled at the old-fashioned clothes, strange haircuts, and formal poses that contrasted with the easy intimacy they shared now. "How you look so serious here, Uncle Daniel," Camilla commented, pointing to a photo of a 10-year-old Daniel rigidly posed beside a piano. "I was a very serious child," he admitted with a smile at the memory. "Always worried about pleasing everyone, living up to expectations." "And Daddy always seems to be smiling," Lucia observed, flipping to another photo of Augusto at the same age, face smeared with chocolate, missing baby teeth visible in a wide grin. Carmen touched the photo with her fingertips, as if she could reach that moment in the past. "Your dad was always like that," she confirmed, finding joy in the simplest things. Augusto put an arm around his mother's shoulders, kissing the top of her graying head. "I learned from the best," he said softly. Carmen discreetly wiped away a tear, her gaze lingering on the open album, a visual chronicle of her sons, separated and finally reunited. "Perhaps I made many mistakes," she said, her voice low but resolute. "But being here today, seeing you together, makes me believe that, in the end, things happened as they were meant to." The simplicity of that statement carried the weight of decades of pain, guilt, and ultimately redemption. It wasn't a complete absolution for separating the twins, but an acknowledgement that sometimes, out of the hardest choices, new beginnings can grow. Daniel placed his hand gently over Carmen's. "They weren't mistakes, Mom," he said, using that word, Mom, for the first time to address her. "They were impossible choices in impossible circumstances." In that moment, on Carmen's face, Daniel saw a kind of peace that hadn't been there before, as though that single word, Mom, had finally unlocked something deep in her heart. The afternoon wore on, the heat yielding to a pleasant breeze. The twins, tired from playing, fell asleep on the living room couch, one's head resting on the other's shoulder. Eleanor and Carmen chatted quietly in the kitchen while tidying up the last of the lunch. Augusto and Daniel returned to the yard, sitting on the steps of the small back porch. "Sometimes it still feels like a dream," Augusto commented, watching the sky take on orange hues as dusk approached. "All of this. You, our mom here, the house, my health coming back." Daniel nodded, understanding perfectly. "For me too," he admitted. "For years, I felt something was missing in my life without knowing what it was. Now I understand. Family," Augusto concluded. "Yes, but not just that. Belonging. A place where I can just be myself." Augusto smiled, looking at his brother with obvious affection. "You know what the girls told me the other day? That you're the best uncle in the world." I asked them why, expecting them to talk about gifts or outings, but they said, "Because he always smiles when he sees us." Daniel felt a lump in his throat, unable to respond immediately. "It's true," Augusto went on. "You smile differently now. When we first met, your smiles seemed calculated, like you measured how much to show. Now they're genuine." "I never really had reasons for genuine smiles before," Daniel confessed. "I had success, recognition, money. But I came home to an empty house every night. Glancing around at the yard where the twins had played for hours, the warmly lit house where Elena and Carmen chatted, his brother beside him, Daniel felt a deep, unwavering certainty. He belonged here. The successful businessman who had built a financial empire now understood a truth no business book could teach. True wealth lay not in his fortune, but in the family that against all odds, he had managed to rebuild. "What are you thinking?" Augusto asked, noticing Daniel's thoughtful silence. Daniel smiled, one of those genuine smiles his brother had just mentioned. "How rich I am," he replied simply. Augusto raised an eyebrow, an ironic smile on his lips. "Well, that's not really news to anyone." Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "Not that kind of wealth," he clarified. "The real kind." Augusto nodded, understanding without further explanation. The two brothers remained side by side, enveloped in a comfortable silence, as the sun began to set over the city. Inside the house, they could hear the soft voices of Elena and Carmen, the occasional clink of dishes being put away, and the distant sound of the twins stirring from their nap. Ordinary sounds, everyday moments, simple yet infinitely valuable. And that was enough. More than enough, it was everything.